Hey, what's going on there, guys? Bo here with Top Deck Cards and Games, and I'm back with another deck tech for you. Today we are going to be taking a look at green-black Delirium for Standard. Now, this deck has just won the Star City Open right after the set was released, so that's kind of cool that this deck is just right out of the gate doing well, even in a field of like the Jeskai combo deck or any other variant of the combo deck that involves Feldar Guardian. So it's really cool that this deck powered through that whole event. It did really well. I made some small changes to it that I would like to share with you guys here today. But if you haven't seen this deck, it's really cool, and it takes use of some of the new cards out of Aether Revolt, which I think is pretty sweet. So we're going to just jump right on into it, taking a look at the creatures. So the first thing that we have here, we have a playset of Winding Constrictors. So Winding Constrictors, the 2/3 for 2, and basically with Winding Constrictor, whenever one of our dudes would get a counter, whether that is with like Virtuous Gearhulk, whether it's like our Walking Ballista coming into the battlefield, if it would get a counter, it gets that many counters +1. So it's really sweet because whenever you have Virtuous Gearhulk, like let's say you play the Virtuous Gearhulk and you put one counter on 4 different creatures. So each creature would normally get like just one +1/+1 counter. But with a Winding Constrictor out there, they are actually going to get 2 counters. So that's 8 power that you're adding on to the board, which is actually pretty insane. And especially with like Ballista, like this deck gets out of hand very quick with how big the creatures are. As far as a fair deck goes, this deck gets a lot bigger. We have a playset of Grimflayer. Grimflayer is awesome just because we get use of his ability to be able to manipulate the top of our deck. We can put some stuff into our graveyard to fuel up Delirium quite quick. And at the same pace, this guy has Trample, which is also quite insane whenever it comes to pushing a whole lot of damage through and even getting your abilities to go off. We have a playset of Walking Ballista in here, as you guys could assume. Ballista is basically our hangerback walker of this season, except this card is so much more. I would agree with the statements that were made at the Star City event that this is the best card out of Aether Revolt. Right out of the gate, I thought that this card was just absolutely insane, super huge in power, and the fact that it can stop the Saheeli combo is really awesome, just because it has the ability to remove a counter and deal 1 damage. But this card being able to enter in with an additional counter because of the Constrictor is awesome. But at the same time, even with the 4 mana ability to put a counter on, putting 2 counters on for 4 mana is awesome as well. So Ballista ends up being just like a really awesome powerhouse card. The fact that it can hit a player as well is sweet, because you can like attack a Planeswalker and then finish it off with like just removing counters off the Ballista. And I think that's just perfect for a design of a card, as far as being able to be super aggressive with the card and also be extremely defensive with the card, and just like bricking off your opponent's stuff, just like killing off all of their things. I think that's insane. We have 3 Tireless Trackers. I like Tireless Tracker in this list, especially so much that I wanted to bump up the number of Tireless Trackers that we were playing in the main board, just because the clues that Tireless Tracker generates in this deck are awesome, because you get to sacrifice them and you can get advantage off of your Fatal Push, which is a very unique thing that you get to do in this deck, outside of, I don't know, like killing off your own Ballista, like sacrificing it down and like pointing damage anywhere, or cracking like an Evolving Wilds. You have a lot of different angles to enable Revolt for Fatal Push, which I think is what is necessary in this type of a deck. We have 2 Rishkar, Pima Renegade. So Rishkar is sweet because this card gives a lot of different angles to this deck. So first and foremost, whenever he enters, he's going to put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. So if you have the snake out there already, you go turn 2 snake, turn 3 Rishkar. You're adding 4 power to the board, assuming you put a counter on the snake and Rishkar, which ends up being 2 counters on snake and Rishkar, which is sweet. But on top of that, each creature that you control that has a counter on it has tap, add a green mana to your mana pool. So when you're playing against fair decks and you don't have to worry about combo or whatever, having more mana and having like all of your dudes with counters essentially be like Servant of the Conduits, not really at the same pace because Servant taps for any mana, but having all of them be able to tap for mana and let you dump out more stuff out of your hand is that puts you so far ahead of like anything your opponent's doing. It's really, really awesome just being able to dump out more things in one turn. We have a playset of Mind Rack Demon. Mind Rack is awesome just because of how many artifact creatures we play in this deck and how easy it is to actually enable Delirium. And this card is insane because your opponent's not going to play a Gideon after you play a turn 4 Mind Rack Demon, just because you can nuke the Gideon immediately. So the fact that this card like makes your opponent have to play a certain way just because you're playing the Mind Rack Demon or you resolve the Mind Rack Demon is really, really awesome. It blocks like everything that matters. It blocks like Avacyn's. It can block just about like all of the good creatures in the format, which is sweet. And just the fact that it has Flying Trample is really, really dope. But I think the biggest thing about this card is just the fact that it kills cards like Gideon immediately if they were to play it if you're like on the play. So I think that's a very unique thing to have with Mind Rack Demon now that you don't have to worry about people Reflector Maging it back to your hand, and you don't have to worry about Emrakul in general. We have a playset of Virtuous Gearhulk here to round out our creatures. So Gearhulk is broke just with like the Winding Constrictor, just because you get to just manipulate a whole lot of extra power out onto your board. The Virtuous Gearhulk itself has Trample, which is very, very noteworthy. But being able to make all of your stuff bigger in any fair matchup is just going to set you way ahead of your opponent. And Gearhulk against other fair decks is not very fair. It's definitely not very fair at all. For the rest of our cards that we're playing in here, we have 2 Fatal Push to be able to kill a 2 CMC creature or a 4 CMC creature with Revolt. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of manipulation you can do with how you go about getting Revolt, whether that is taking off all the counters of your Walking Ballista, sacrificing a clue with Tireless Tracker, cracking an Evolving Wilds, maybe even grasping one of your own creatures or something like that. But at the same pace, you're probably just going to use the grasp on the other creature as it is. Maybe it's like way too big. Maybe it's a Tireless Tracker that's like really, really big. But Fatal Push has a lot of different angles where we can accomplish Revolt, which I think is pretty unique in this type of a deck. It's intentional. It's intentionally unique. We have 3 Traverse. The Traverse allowing us to hit more lands or otherwise, with Delirium, hit any of the good creatures that we have in the deck. Usually you're going to be going for like Gearhulk, but sometimes maybe you have to clear damage over a cluttered board, and that means getting a Mind Rack Demon, or you have a bunch of mana that you can sink, so you go for a Walking Ballista. We have a playset of Grasp of Darkness. Grasp is awesome. It stops the combo. It hits all of like the relevant creatures in the format for the most part. Doesn't hit Mind Rack Demon, which sucks, but it still hits like a good portion of like all the good creatures that matter in the format right now. So being able to like grasp is nuts. And I don't know, even if you're like facing up against like your opponent flashing in Torrential Gearhulk and casting back Glimmer to block like Grimflare, you grasp their Torrential Gearhulk and still push damage over it, assuming your Grimflare like has Delirium, but usually that'll be the case by turn 6. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do as far as manipulation goes, and any of your creatures having Trample is super relevant. We're playing 1 To the Slaughter in the main board to be able to hit creatures and or planeswalkers that your opponent might have. So if your opponent goes for like Gideon and 0 ability to make a dude, if you don't have Delirium, you can use To the Slaughter in response and make them sacrifice the Gideon before they get the creature, assuming they have nothing on board. But with Delirium, you get to navigate around your opponent having creatures and force them to sacrifice their Planeswalker, which usually they'll only have 1. If they have multiple Planeswalkers, I don't know, it's probably not looking great for you unless you can just nuke them immediately anyway. And then the last spells that we have in the deck are 2 more Ruinous Paths. So Planeswalkers are just huge right now. Planeswalkers are just so good, and being able to hit creatures and or Planeswalkers is awesome. Ruinous Path also has the dual modal feature of being able to have Awaken if you want to dump 7 mana instead of 3 into it, so that's also quite good for it. For our lands, we're playing a playset of Hissing Quagmire, we're playing a playset of Blooming Marsh, 2 Evolving Wilds, which will interact with our Tireless Tracker, but also it's just for fixing for us as well, just to be able to hit our lands efficiently and also fuel Delirium for us. And then for the basics, we are playing 6 Forests and we're playing 7 Swamps. So that is the main deck that we have for this black-green Delirium deck. Now we'll take a look at this sideboard. The sideboard's a little bit closer to what was played at the event. I don't think I changed very much out of that sideboard, but the deck is still just really good. It's a very impressive deck to be playing early into the format, definitely, and it's definitely something to look out for as far as what you would expect to see, or decks that you might see in your meta going forward. So we have one Nissa for the control decks and the mid-range decks. Anywhere where you would just want to pressure the board a little bit faster, get a little bit more advantage faster, Nissa is the perfect way to go about it. Same thing goes with Ob Nixilis. We're playing a singleton Ob Nixilis to draw more cards than our opponent. We also have a walking removal on a stick with the Ob Nixilis as well, which is really sweet. And if you ult him, chances are you're just going to win the game because you ulted and your opponent didn't have a way to kill the Ob Nixilis in general. We're playing 3 Lost Legacy in here as well. Lost Legacy is awesome because whenever you're playing against the combo deck, if you assume your opponent isn't like siding out the combo deck the combo entirely, you can go and just try and name like Saheeli right off the rip and just take away your opponent's value from being able to combo off. That's really the biggest thing that you want with Lost Legacy. You can also side it in against control decks and name their like counter spells, or like Glimmer, Torrential Gearhulk, their Planeswalkers, stuff like that you would expect them to be playing that are just like a little bit too powerful for you, or cards you don't want them to have in general. So the Lost Legacy ends up being insane for that. Just being able to name cards against super slow decks or combo decks in general. So you just get to get around their stuff like that. The only thing is you can't name artifacts. I don't know if I just mentioned Torrential Gearhulk. You can't name Gearhulk with it, but you can name like just basically everything else that's good that they have. So you have to have a little bit of experience playing Lost Legacy and resolving that card. But when it comes down to it, that card is just really good right now. We have 3 Yahenni's Expertise, mainly just for the aggro decks of the format. You just get to side this in, hit the board for -3/-3, and then cast another card out of your hand. So maybe it kills off some of your stuff. Who cares? You're just going to cast another card out of your hand for free, which is like really nuts. We have 2 more To the Slaughter, just that as a instant speed answer to any of the stuff that our opponent might be playing. If they're playing a Planeswalker heavy decks, you just get to smash them just for the huge value that you have off the Delirium and just as its own. But being able to have another answer with Delirium to the Jeskai combo, or the Cat combo in general, is pretty sweet. We have 2 natural states in here. So the natural state is awesome for like vehicle decks. Otherwise, if you see somebody playing like Dynavolt Tower control, stuff like that, natural state's just really good. Wherever you see it applicable, the natural state usually ends up being insane. And then we have some singletons. So we have a singleton Kalitas for just trying to get ahead. Like, this card's good against the mirror match. It's good against like any of the other grindy decks where like Kalitas plus removal spell means you get a dude on top of killing your opponent's stuff, which is pretty nuts. Also, being able to get 3 counters on Kalitas instead of 2 with the Winding Constrictor is like actually kind of insane. But at the same pace, like Kalitas is just really good against aggro as well. We have a Noxious Gearhulk that is pretty much like the same thing. If you're playing against like the other grindy creature decks, resolving a Gearhulk means you get to get rid of their best thing off the board, gain some life as well. And the Gearhulk itself has Menace, so if you put counters on the Gearhulk from there with like Virtuous Gearhulk, you're probably just doing something right with your life. Like, you're probably just winning that game from there on just because of the Menace. And Ishkana. So Ishkana is great for gumming up the board when you're playing against aggro, especially if they're playing like Aethersphere Harvester or like Heart of Kiran. You can block those with the Ishkana itself. With Delirium, the 1/2s end up being pretty good at blocking the rest of the stuff that your opponent might have. And even against the mirror match, like just getting to throw more blockers out onto the field and throw more things that can manipulate combat damage is quite insane. So that is the deck tech that I have for you guys here for Green-Black Delirium. As far as the first week of Standard goes here, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to thumbs up the video and subscribe for more content. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching and peace out.